wrap up right before lunch, and we're gonna cover radiation. So, a couple things. Remember, we're talking about your actions as first responders, right? So we're covering items of recognition, right? We want to recognize it, which we put up there on the board. We want to identify that we're dealing with something, and then we want to consider how we can move forward and how we can act and respond safely. So, what three types of radiation are you guys familiar with? Alpha, beta, gamma. And then there's this other one over here which we're going to talk about called neutron. Okay, so let's talk about those. We've heard them, alpha, beta, gamma. We know what they are. So how do we deal with them, and how do we respond to those and take actions that are going to be safe? So let's break them down. Alpha. Alpha particles, radiation particles. Look at them like this. They're a little bit like a cotton ball, right? And if I have an alpha particle up here, right? Think of a cotton ball, although they're much smaller, they're not visible to the naked eye. I could take that alpha particle and I could throw it. If I was the source, I could throw it as hard as I wanted to away from the source of that radiation. And that alpha particle is only going to travel 1 to 2 centimeters. So when we think about things like how close we are to a source, that alpha particle can only emit 1 to 2 centimeters away from the actual source. So we need to be very close. We would actually need to have that source in our hands, right, in terms of how far it can travel. Now, when we move on to a beta, right, a beta particle, that's kind of like a BB, okay? It's capable, if this desk or this lectern was the source, and we're coming in to deal with this, it's capable of emitting those beta particles up to approximately 10 feet, okay? So when we look at these things, we think about how close, how personal, right, do we have to be with it with the alpha particles right in our hands. Beta particles, they can emit approximately up to 10 feet, right? Then we get into gamma, right? So we got alpha is like a cotton ball, beta is like a BB. Gamma, guys, is kind of like a cannonball, all right? It is going to be able to emit its energy for great distances, and in terms of our protection, right, it's going to be able to go right through our turnout gear, which leads us to what we want to talk about. How do we dress, and can we respond safely to radiation events wearing the personal protective equipment that you guys are provided on the fire trucks, which is what? Structural fire protective gear and SCBA. So, gamma, it's capable of traveling great distances. You're going to need some other source other than your PPE provided to protect you. What do you think some sources might be that you would need to use to protect yourself from a gamma radiation source? Yes?
Sure, because I believe lead is concrete to a certain thickness.
Okay.
From gamma.
Very good. Lead, right? When you guys, has anybody in here ever had an x-ray done? Right? Remember they put that, when they do the chest x-ray, they'll put that apron, which is right here. They'll put that apron, that gamma x-rays, they'll put it over you to protect you from that gamma radiation. So you need several feet of concrete, lead, steel. Those are the types of things you need to protect you from that gamma source. So let's backtrack. Alpha, beta, and gamma. You guys respond as first responders to a radiation incident. It could be a source of radiation that's being transported across the roadway, right? Cargo van gets involved in an auto accident, a package spills out, you see the radiation label, right? It's being transported over the road. You go up to the van, you're trying to help people out of the van, right? Patients. We're trying to extricate them out, get them out, put them on backboard, C-spine them, take care of them. Are you safe with an alpha and a beta source if you are in your turnouts in SCBA?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Here's where we want to go back. Let's review. With the alpha and beta, travel short distances, okay? Things that you need to protect you. Alpha particles, something just as simple as a sheet of paper can provide protection. So now you think when you have your turnouts on, right? You got your coat, multiple layers in the coat, multiple layers in the pants, your boots, you got gloves on, right? That is adequate to protect you against that alpha source. Plus, what did we say with the alpha source? You have to be how close to it? 1 to 2 centimeters. So you have to actually have that radiation source in your hand. Okay? Beta, right? Like a BB, can travel up to 10 feet away from that source. Do we have the ability to operate a safe distance away from that package? Maybe we do, maybe we don't. But remember again, in terms of your level of protection, your turnout coat, your turnout pants, that penetrating source, as long as we don't stay there for long periods of time, close proximity to it, you will be safe to operate to perform that rescue and get those folks out of the car. Now, what's one piece of equipment that we haven't yet talked about PPE-wise? Talked about your structural fire protective gear, SCBA. Because here's the thing that I want you guys to take away from that. Your turnouts are great. That's what you're going to wear. That's going to be the ensemble. But if you are up around a known radiation source, right, in this example we gave with an auto accident, right, you have a known source in there, you have to have that SCBA on, and you have to be breathing that air, because we talked about the particle size. Alpha, not visible to the naked eye. Beta, not visible to the naked eye. So it's not like you're going to see these things floating around in the car. But if you don't have that SCBA on, you don't have that face piece intact, you do run the risk of inhaling those particles, and once they get inside your body, if it's ionizing radiation, there are things with radiation which we call half-lives, right? So we have this particular radiation source, call it cobalt, call it whatever you want, right? It has a half-life. Guys, the half-life of a lot of radiation sources out there far exceed the accumulated lifespan of all of us in this room. So that means if you inhale it into your body, right, now it's bouncing around in your lungs and it's working its way through your system. It's like a ping pong ball. It's just going to bounce around in there for the duration of its half-life. And what does radiation do to us? What does radiation sickness cause? I'll help you out. It attacks your cells, right? And it likes those rapidly producing cells, right? Skin, gum, hair, the lining in your systems. It just attacks those. That's what it attaches itself to. So for that entire half-life, for the time that it's bouncing around in your body, if you have inhaled it, it's going to be attacking your body, right, for that entire duration. So the one takeaway piece is we have to make sure that we're wearing that SCBA and we have that with that face piece on and breathing air when we are in those known environments. Okay? So we've talked about alpha, talked about beta, talked about gamma, neutron, right? Where might we find a neutron? Nuclear reactors. I heard somebody whisper under the voice. Right? Those are those types of things with neutron. You're going to have to be in an environment. You're not going to see those things transported out across the roadway. You're not going to run across those in a medical setting, right? You are at a actual facility where they have nuclear reactors.
They're actually smashing atoms.
Yes.
You have to have an atom smasher, a fissile process to do it.
So those things, you're going to know if you're there, and trust me, you're just not going to wander into those facilities or wander across those things, right? So we've got alpha, beta, gamma, and neutron. Now, how do we protect ourselves against radiation? There's some examples up here, right? It talks about alpha, beta, gamma, neutron particles we talk about. But what are some principles that we can apply in operating around this scenario for this auto accident that should always be in the back of our mind? TD and S. Yes?
Sorry for help, right? Time, distance, and shielding.
Time, distance, and shielding. Very good. You have to remember that when we're dealing with an incident involving radiation. So time, very simple, right? Limit the amount of time that you find yourself near that source. So in the example of an auto accident where we're having to remove people from the vehicle or possibly extricate people from the vehicle, if we've got serious concerns about that source of radiation, we limit the amount of time that our responders, you folks, are in that environment. So as the incident is working, we talked yesterday about the incident command system and how everything is set up going through that process. That incident commander may minimize the time that they put you up there to extricate people out of that particular vehicle, right? Minimize the time that you're exposed to them, right? Distance, right? Very simple. We talked about 1 to 2 centimeters, 10 feet, long distances. You want to distance yourself away from that as much as you can. So when we're dealing with radiation, just like anything else, you have to have a task. You have to have a purpose for being around it. We don't want to just go up there and mill around that source, right? We want to go up there, perform our activity, and then we get away. Shielding, we covered. Shielding, for the most part, guys, and I will put this out there for you as first responders, as well as hazardous materials technicians, there is not a better source of personal protective equipment that we are going to wear as hazmat techs to protect us against radiation than what you would wear as your ensemble's first